Realize that the people who gave you life never actually wanted you to live? I'm not talking about neglect or abuse in the traditional sense. I'm talking about something quieter, more insidious. The kind of erasure that happens in plain sight, where you're present but invisible, needed but never wanted. 3 weeks ago, on what should have been the proudest night of my life, I finally heard the words that confirmed what I'd known my entire existence. And for the first time, I stopped pretending they weren't true. My name is James Cooper, and I'm 28 years old. In mid-July, I passed the New York State Bar exam on my first attempt. Before that, I'd graduated from Columbia Law School in the top 15% of my class. A mid-sized corporate firm in Manhattan offered me a position on their litigation team, starting at $190,000 a year. By any reasonable measure, I'd made it. But reasonable measures don't apply when you've spent your whole life trying to earn love from people who view affection as currency. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. I'd reserved a private dining room at Keen's Steakhouse in Midtown, one of those old Manhattan institutions with wood-paneled walls and the kind of masculine atmosphere that makes you feel like you're stepping into a different era. The whole evening cost me $3,500, but after years of student loans and side jobs, I wanted one night to mark what I'd accomplished. I invited my law professors, the senior partners from my new firm, and Ben Sullivan, my closest friend since college. And of course, my parents. Richard and Patricia Cooper arrived exactly on time, dressed like they were attending a board meeting rather than their son's celebration. My father wore a charcoal suit, his Wall Street uniform, while my mother had chosen a navy dress that probably cost more than my first month's rent. They brought no card, no flowers, nothing to suggest they were there for me rather than to be seen. My brother Owen didn't show. He was supposedly presenting at a conference in Boston, something about biomedical engineering research. At 25, Owen was the family's shining star, pursuing his PhD at MIT while I'd always been the practical one who handled problems no one wanted to acknowledge. The evening started pleasantly enough. My former professor, a woman who'd mentored me through some of the hardest semesters, raised her glass during appetizers. James was one of the most dedicated students I've had the privilege to teach, she said warmly. The kind of work ethic you don't see often. My mother's smile was thin and performative. That's lovely. Owen just published his third research paper. In Nature, no less. My father nodded. Now that's real intellectual achievement. I felt Ben shift beside me, but I kept my expression neutral. This was familiar territory. I'd learned long ago not to expect anything different. Later, when the hiring partner stood to make a toast, I allowed myself a moment of hope. Maybe this would be different. Maybe they'd see me tonight. James will be an asset to our litigation team, he said, his voice carrying authority. We're lucky to have him. The table murmured appreciation. My father's voice cut through clearly enough for everyone to hear. Law is respectable, I suppose. Not quite research science, but it pays the bills. My mother added, Owen's work will actually save lives. That's what matters. The table went quiet. I watched my colleagues exchange uncomfortable glances, not sure how to respond. Ben's jaw tightened, and he leaned forward. James worked 3 jobs through law school, he said, his tone protective. That takes serious commitment. My mother's response was cool, dismissive. Yes, well, Owen received a full fellowship. Merit-based, of course. We never had to worry about Owen's finances, my father added. Something inside me cracked. Not broke, just cracked. Enough to let the truth slip through. I worked because I was paying Owen's undergraduate loans, I said. My voice was calm, steady. I covered the property taxes when you missed payments. Twice. My father's face flushed. This isn't the time or place. I sent money every month for 4 years. While working full-time. While studying for the bar. My mother stood, her chair scraping against the floor. The private dining room felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. She turned to look at the table, then back at me, and her voice was ice. You've always been so transactional, James. So calculating. I've been responsible, I said. There's a difference. She paused, and in that pause, I saw something flicker across her face. Not regret. Recognition, maybe, that she was about to say something that couldn't be taken back. She said it anyway. Sometimes I genuinely wish you'd never come into the world. Owen should have been our only child. The collective gasp was audible. Someone's wine glass hit the table. A fork clattered against china. I stood slowly, my napkin falling from my lap. I looked at my mother, then at my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I paused. The room seemed to stop moving. No one knew what to say. Then act as if I was never part of it, I said. The words came out calm, almost quiet, but they landed like stones. I turned to my guests, the people who'd shown up to celebrate me. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the meal. It's paid for. I walked out. I didn't look back at my parents. I didn't wait for explanations or apologies that would never come. I just left. The August heat hit me as I stepped onto the street, thick and heavy with that particular Manhattan humidity that makes the city feel like it's breathing. I walked without direction, letting the crowds absorb me. My phone buzzed. A text from Ben. I'm right behind you. Meet at your place? I typed back a simple yes. The walk to the subway felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. But it wasn't shock I felt. It was clarity. Finally hearing what I'd always known, what I'd spent 28 years trying to disprove. I was never going to be enough for them. Because the problem wasn't me. It never had been. The next morning, my phone screen showed 7 missed calls from my mother and 3 from my father. One text from Patricia Cooper glowed on the screen. You made a spectacle of yourself. In front of professionals. Unacceptable. Nothing from Owen. Not a word. Not a question. I sat at the kitchen table in my Astoria apartment, the one I'd been sharing with a rotating cast of roommates for the past 3 years. The place had never felt like home, just a spot to sleep between work and studying. Now it felt like a cage I'd been too tired to notice. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank account. 3 automatic transfers were scheduled for the first of the month. $800 to my parents' property tax escrow account. $450 toward Owen's remaining student loan balance. $600 to the family emergency fund that had never once been used for my emergencies. My hand hovered over the mouse. Then I clicked cancel on all 3. The confirmation screens appeared one after another. Each one felt like unlocking a door I didn't know had been keeping me trapped. Sitting there with that confirmation screen glowing in front of me, memories flooded back. Not all at once, but in waves, each one another piece of evidence I'd been ignoring for years. I was 12 years old, standing in our kitchen with a certificate in my hands. Regional science competition, first place. I'd spent 3 months building a robotic arm that could sort objects by color and size. The kind of project that required late nights in our garage, careful soldering, programming I'd taught myself from library books. I'd been so proud I could barely stand still. My mother was on the phone when I walked in. She glanced at me, held up one finger, kept talking. I waited by the counter, the certificate getting damp in my grip. 10 minutes passed. 15. Finally, she hung up, and I held out my achievement like an offering. She smiled vaguely. That's nice, sweetheart. That was it. Just those 3 words. Then she turned toward the living room and called for my father. Richard, Owen's teacher says he's showing signs of being gifted. She wants us to have him tested. My certificate ended up in the kitchen junk drawer, buried under takeout menus and old batteries. Owen's participation ribbon from soccer, the one he got just for showing up to 6 games, went on the refrigerator with a magnet. 4 years later, I was a National Merit Scholar. The letter came with full-ride offers from 3 different state universities, plus a yearly stipend for living expenses. 16 years old, and I'd earned a free education. I'd run down the stairs to tell my parents, the letters clutched in my hand. My father looked up from his newspaper. State schools are fine for most people, James. Most people. Not him. Not Owen. Most people. My mother had been more direct. We need to focus our resources on Owen's prep programs. His potential is exceptional. You understand. The scholarship stipend, she'd suggested gently, could go into the family account. For emergencies. For everyone's benefit. I'd nodded, 17 years old, and already learning that my accomplishments were currency to be spent on someone else. I never saw that money again. Columbia accepted me with a partial scholarship when I was 21. 50% tuition coverage. The letter arrived the same day Owen got his acceptance to MIT. No financial aid for him at all, just the prestige of the name and a price tag of $70,000 a year. We'd sat around the dining room table, the 2 acceptance letters between us like competing offers. My father had his reading glasses on, my mother her hands folded carefully in front of her. They looked at Owen's letter for a long time, discussing the opportunities, the caliber of the program, the doors it would open. They spent maybe 30 seconds on mine. You'll need to take out loans, James, my father had said, his tone matter of fact. We're investing in Owen's education. It's where the money needs to go. I'd mentioned my scholarship money, the stipend they'd been holding. My mother had reached across the table and patted my hand. Family means sacrifice, sweetheart. Owen's potential is exceptional. Surely you can see that. I took out maximum student loans. $90,000 in debt before I'd even walked into my first college class. I worked campus security at night, 8-hour shifts, studying between rounds. My classmates went to parties. I went to work. Law school was worse. Columbia Law accepted me, but the tuition was $65,000 a year. I worked full-time as a paralegal, 40 to 50 hours a week, then went to class at night. Weekends were for studying. There were no breaks, no holidays, no room to breathe. Second year, I'd hit a wall. Physical and emotional exhaustion that made my hands shake and my vision blur. I'd called home on a Sunday afternoon, my voice cracking as I explained I might need to take a semester off. Just to rest. Just to catch up financially. My father's response had been immediate and cold. Don't be weak, James. Owen never complained during his master's program. He managed just fine. Owen had managed with their full financial support. No job, no debt, nothing but time to focus on his studies. But pointing that out felt petty, so I didn't. My mother had added that they couldn't help me financially. Owen was applying to PhD programs and needed their support for application fees, campus visits, the security deposit on his new apartment. I never asked them for money again. But they asked me. It was the summer after graduation, while I was studying for the bar exam. I was living on savings and credit cards, working part-time to cover rent, barely holding it together financially. My phone rang late one evening. My mother, her voice tight with stress. Owen's stipend had been delayed by some administrative error. He couldn't make rent. They were temporarily short on cash, she'd explained. They'd just bought a new Mercedes, actually. Could I cover him? Just for 2 months, until the stipend came through. I was studying for the single most important exam of my career. I was barely making my own rent. My bar prep course cost $2,000 that I didn't have. I'd said yes anyway, because that's what you do for family, right? I'd transferred $2,400, money I didn't have, and put my bar prep course on a credit card. Owen never said thank you. My parents never paid me back. And I passed the bar exam while carrying that debt, that exhaustion, that weight of knowing I was only valuable when they needed something. Ben showed up the next evening with pizza and beer. He let himself in, took one look at me, and set the food on the counter. You doing okay? He asked. I canceled the transfers, I said. He nodded slowly. Good. They're going to be furious. They should be grateful you funded them this long. He grabbed 2 beers from the 6-pack, opened them both, and handed me one. You know what my mom told me when my dad left? I shook my head. She said at some point you realize you're watering a dead plant. You can pour everything you have into it, but if the roots are gone, nothing's going to grow. They're my parents, I said. No, Ben replied. They're people who had a kid they didn't want and another they put on a pedestal. There's a difference. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't, because he was right. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to admit it. Within the week, I started apartment hunting. The studio in Brooklyn Heights had hardwood floors, exposed brick, and a large window that overlooked a quiet street lined with brownstones. At $2,400 a month, I could actually afford it now that I wasn't sending $1,850 home every month. I signed the lease on a Friday afternoon. Moving happened the following weekend, just before I started my new job. It took less time than I expected. I didn't have much I wanted to keep. My law books and laptop. Clothes, mostly work suits. A few personal items. One framed photo of Ben and me at Columbia graduation, both of us in caps and gowns, laughing like the future was wide open. I left behind everything they'd given me, everything that reminded me of being the invisible son. That first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor. Furniture was being delivered in a few weeks after my first paycheck. The apartment was quiet in a way my old place never had been, but it wasn't empty quiet. It was peaceful. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the muted sounds of Brooklyn outside my window, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this calm. I found a note in one of my boxes the next morning, something I'd written to myself during first year of law school. Remember why you're doing this. Prove you're worth something. I tore it into pieces and threw it away. That wasn't the goal anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Work started 2 weeks after the dinner, and I walked into that Manhattan office building feeling like I was stepping into a life I'd earned rather than borrowed. The law firm occupied several floors of a glass tower in the financial district, all clean lines and modern furniture and the kind of quiet efficiency that comes from people who bill their time in 6-minute increments. I was assigned to Victoria Brennan's litigation team, a senior partner with a reputation for being brilliant and demanding in equal measure. Our first case involved a pharmaceutical company facing a contract dispute with one of their suppliers. $8 million in potential damages, complex intellectual property issues, the kind of case that could define careers or destroy them. Victoria handed me a stack of files 3 inches thick and told me to find everything the other team had missed. I spent the first week reading depositions until my eyes burned. Every page, every footnote, every seemingly insignificant detail. This was different from law school reading. This mattered. Real money, real consequences, real people depending on the work being thorough and correct. Late on a Thursday evening, I found it. A precedent case from 2018. A Fifth Circuit decision that our team hadn't referenced, but that changed the entire framework of our argument. I stayed until midnight writing up my analysis, triple-checking my citations, making sure I wasn't wrong. Victoria came to my desk the next morning, reading my memo as she walked. She stopped in front of me, still reading, then looked up. "This is excellent work, James. How long have you been at this?" "All week," I said. "I mean, how long have you been a lawyer?" "About 3 weeks total." She smiled slightly. "You remind me of myself at your age. Except I wasn't this thorough." She tapped the memo. "This changes our strategy. Good instincts." By week 4, I was taking on more responsibility. Second-chairing depositions, drafting motions, sitting in on client meetings. The work was intense, sometimes 12-hour days, but it was different from the exhaustion I'd known before. This wasn't working 3 jobs to pay bills. This was building something, learning something, becoming someone. Week 7, my research created settlement leverage the client hadn't expected. The opposing party's timeline had an inconsistency I'd caught, a small discrepancy that unraveled their entire damages claim. Victoria presented my findings at mediation, and by the afternoon we'd negotiated a settlement that saved the client $8 million. David Rothman, one of the named partners, came to my office that evening. He was in his 60s, gray hair, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who'd built his reputation over decades. "Victoria tells me this win was your research," he said. "I just found the inconsistency, sir. Victoria and the team did everything else." He smiled. "Don't undersell yourself. We've been watching you. You've got instincts most associates take years to develop." He paused at my door. "Keep this up and you'll make partner faster than anyone expects." Week 8, they assigned me as second chair on a new case. My first time taking an actual deposition, questioning a witness under oath with a court reporter and opposing counsel watching every word. I prepared obsessively, writing out questions, anticipating answers, rehearsing in my apartment until Ben told me to go to sleep. The deposition went smoothly. The witness contradicted their earlier statement. I caught it immediately, pressed politely but firmly until they admitted the inconsistency. Opposing counsel looked annoyed. Victoria looked pleased. Afterward, the opposing counsel stopped me in the hallway outside the conference room. He was older, probably 20 years of practice behind him. "You're fresh out of law school?" he asked. "Passed the bar in July," I said. He shook his head slightly. "You don't depose like a rookie. How long have you been working?" I thought about all those years of paralegal work, of campus security shifts, of learning the law while living it. "A long time," I said. "Just not always as a lawyer." He nodded, understanding something I hadn't quite said. "Well, you're good at it. Your firm is lucky to have you." That night, I sat in my apartment with a beer and let myself feel proud. Not because someone else had praised me, but because I'd done good work. Work that mattered. Work that was mine. The apartment became home gradually, intentionally, in a way nothing had before. This wasn't just a place to sleep between obligations. This was mine. Week 3, the furniture arrived. I'd chosen every piece myself, scrolling through websites at night, imagining what would make a space feel like it belonged to me. A gray couch with clean lines. A coffee table made of reclaimed wood. A bed frame that didn't require assembly from a box. When the delivery men left, I stood in the center of the living room and just looked around, absorbing the fact that every single thing here existed because I'd chosen it. Week 4, I spent an entire Saturday building a bookshelf. Not because I couldn't afford to buy one already assembled, but because I wanted to build something with my hands. I laid out all the pieces on my living room floor, followed the instructions carefully, and by evening I had a 6-foot shelf standing against my wall. I organized my law books by subject, then added the novels I'd collected over the years but never had space to display. Books I'd read during breaks between shifts, stories that had kept me company when nothing else did. Week 5, I bought a kitchen table. Small, just 2 chairs, made of dark wood with simple lines. I'd never had a proper dining table before, always eaten standing at counters or sitting on couches with plates balanced on my knees. That first night, I cooked a real meal. Pasta with vegetables, garlic bread, a glass of wine. I sat at my table, in my apartment, eating food I'd made, and felt something shift in my chest. This was what peace felt like. Week 6, I hung art on the walls. 3 prints of the Brooklyn Bridge taken from different angles, and 2 abstract pieces with bold colors that I'd walked past in a small gallery and couldn't stop thinking about. I'd never bought art before. Never had walls that felt like mine to decorate. The woman at the gallery had asked if I was a collector, and I'd almost laughed. No, I'd said, just someone who's never had a home before. Week 7 brought the coffee maker and French press, good beans from a local roaster, the ritual of making morning coffee that actually tasted like something I'd chosen rather than whatever was cheapest. Week 8, I added plants to the windowsill. Succulents in a small herb garden, basil and mint, things that needed attention but not too much. I bought a record player from a vintage shop in Park Slope and started collecting jazz vinyl. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Billie Holiday. Music I could put on while cooking dinner or reading case files, filling the space with sound that wasn't from a computer or a phone. Each edition felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. The part that liked nice things, that appreciated beauty, that deserved to live somewhere that felt like more than a temporary stop. Ben came over most Friday nights, showing up with takeout from whatever new restaurant he'd discovered that week. We'd eat on my couch or at my table, watch whatever game was on, talk about work or not talk at all. The silence between us was comfortable, the kind that exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. One Friday in September, he looked around the apartment during a commercial break and smiled. "You seem lighter," he said, "like you're not carrying everyone anymore." I thought about it, about the weight I'd gotten so used to I'd forgotten it was there. "I'm just carrying myself now," I replied. "It's manageable." He nodded, understanding in a way only someone who'd survived their own family damage could. We didn't need to say more than that. I started running in the mornings along the Brooklyn Heights Promenade, the path that runs along the water with views of Lower Manhattan across the river. I'd wake up at 6, lace up my shoes, and run as the sun came up over the skyline. The rhythm of my feet on the pavement, my breath in the cool morning air, the city waking up around me. It cleared my head in a way nothing else did. I joined a small gym 3 blocks from my apartment, nothing fancy, just weights and machines, and people who were there to work, not socialize. I lifted until my muscles burned, worked out tension I'd been holding in my shoulders and jaw for years. Sweat and strain and the simple satisfaction of physical exhaustion that wasn't from juggling too many jobs. I slept full nights without waking up in panic about deadlines or bills or disappointing someone. My dreams, when I remembered them, weren't about studying or working or running from one obligation to another. They were just dreams, strange and nonsensical and not weighted with anxiety. People at work started commenting. "You seem more relaxed," one colleague said. "You're smiling more," another mentioned. I hadn't realized I'd been so visibly tense before, so clearly burdened. Now, apparently, I looked like someone who was actually living instead of just surviving. My mother called 3 or 4 times a week. My father emailed twice. "We should talk," one said. "This is childish," said another. I didn't block them. I just didn't engage. Voicemails piled up, unlistened. Owen never reached out at all. I didn't feel anything about Owen's silence anymore. It was just confirmation. He'd been the recipient of my money, my sacrifice, my covering for him. Now that the tap was turned off, he had nothing to say. The work continued to intensify through September and into October. More cases, more responsibility, more recognition. I was building something real, something mine. And then, 10 weeks after the dinner, on a Saturday afternoon in late October, I heard a knock at my door. Firm, insistent, the kind of knock that doesn't wait for permission. I'd just gotten back from my morning run, still in workout clothes. I opened the door and went still. My parents stood in the hallway. Richard in weekend casual, Patricia in an autumn coat, both dressed like they were making a business call. They walked past me into the apartment without invitation. Patricia surveyed the space with thinly veiled criticism. Richard stood by the window, hands in his pockets. I stayed near the door, didn't offer them seats. "We need to discuss family business," my father said. "We don't have family business anymore," I replied. My mother's lips thinned. "Don't be dramatic. Owen is in serious trouble." They explained quickly, efficiently, like they were presenting a case. Owen's PhD funding had been cut due to department budget issues. He needed $35,000 for the year's tuition and living expenses. They were temporarily illiquid, had just invested in new property. The bank wouldn't extend more credit. "We need you to take a loan," Patricia said. "Just temporary." "No." My father's face flushed. "This is your brother. Your family. Owen's not my responsibility," I said. "He never has been." Patricia stepped closer, her voice rising. "You've always been selfish. We raised you. You owe us." "This is what family does," Richard added. "You make a good salary now. You can afford it." I looked at them both, these people who'd spent 28 years telling me I wasn't enough. And I felt nothing but calm. "I paid $14,000 of Owen's undergrad loans," I said. "I sent you $800 a month for 3 years for property taxes. That's $28,000. I covered Owen's rent twice when his stipend was late. I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for law school you told me you couldn't help with. I studied for the bar on credit card debt because I'd loaned Owen money. We're your parents," my father started. "You're people who told me you wished I'd never been born." The silence was absolute. Patricia looked away. Richard's jaw worked, but no words came out. "If you came here to apologize," I said, "I'd listen. If you came to acknowledge what you said, what you've done, we could talk. But you came to demand more. So we're done." My mother's eyes flashed with cold anger. "You'll regret this. One day you'll need family." "I already have family," I replied. "I've built one. People who chose me, who celebrate me, who don't keep score." I walked to the door and opened it. "You need to leave. You're making a mistake," my father said. "The mistake was believing I could ever be enough for you." They left. Patricia paused in the hallway, delivering one final line. "Don't come crawling back." "I won't," I said, and closed the door. I leaned against it, waiting for guilt or fear or doubt. But there was only relief. Clarity. Peace. I texted Ben. They came. I said no. "I'm okay." His response was immediate. "Damn right you are. Beer tonight?" I smiled. "Yeah." The next 2 weeks brought a surge of momentum at work. The pharmaceutical case I'd been building since August finally went to mediation. My research proved crucial to the outcome. The client settled for $12 million, avoiding what could have been a $20 million exposure. Victoria pulled me aside afterward. "Your work was exceptional," she said. "Management is noticing." A week after that, a reporter from the New York Law Journal contacted the firm. They were doing their annual feature on rising associates, young lawyers to watch. The firm nominated me. I agreed to the interview, though part of me hesitated. I wasn't used to being visible. The article published in late November. The headline read, "James Cooper, From Night Shifts to Legal Wins." It covered my journey, working through undergrad, law school, passing the bar on the first attempt. They quoted me directly. "I learned early that no one was going to hand me anything. You work for what you want, and you don't wait for validation that might never come." And later, "The best thing I ever did was stop trying to earn love from people who treated it like currency." The article spread quickly on legal social media. Colleagues congratulated me. My inbox filled with messages from other young lawyers. But one email stood out, from a complete stranger. "I grew up as the invisible child too. Reading about your success gave me permission to stop trying to fix what was never my fault. Thank you." I read that email 3 times. My story mattered beyond myself. That realization sat heavy and light at the same time. My mother sent an email. Cold, clipped. "That article was inappropriate. You aired private family matters." My father texted. "You made us look negligent. Completely unprofessional." Owen finally broke his silence. Did you have to mention me? People are asking questions. I deleted all 3 messages. Then I blocked their numbers. The final boundary, set clearly and calmly. I threw a small gathering at my apartment on a Friday evening in early December. Nothing extravagant, just people who mattered. Ben brought champagne and steaks. Victoria Brennan came, surprising me by bringing expensive wine. 2 colleagues from the firm showed up, along with my favorite law professor who'd driven down from Columbia. 7 people total, filling my living room with warmth and laughter. The lights were soft, jazz playing in the background. Brooklyn glittered through the window like the city was celebrating with us. Food covered the kitchen counter, a mix of things I'd cooked and what others had brought. The conversation flowed easily, comfortably, without performance or pretense. Ben stood and raised his glass. To James, who taught me that the family you choose is the one that counts. Victoria added, to the hardest worker I know who's finally working for himself. My professor lifted her glass. To a student who never needed validation but deserves every bit of recognition he's getting. Glasses clinked together. I felt my throat tighten, a rare moment of emotion breaking through. Thank you, I said. All of you. You showed up when it mattered. Later, after everyone else had left, Ben stayed to help clean up. We worked in comfortable silence, loading the dishwasher, putting away leftover food. You look different now, he said. Settled. I feel like I finally stopped running, I replied. From them or towards something? I paused, considering. Both. Away from needing their approval. Toward building something that's mine. Ben nodded. It suits you. That night, after Ben left, I stood at my window with a glass of whiskey. Brooklyn spread out below me, quiet and alive all at once. I thought about the dinner, the devastation, the distance I created. I remembered the younger version of myself, desperate to prove he was worth something, worth loving. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. My phone buzzed. Another email, another stranger who'd read the article. Your article helped me set boundaries with my family. First time in my life I felt free. I smiled. The pain hadn't been wasted if it helped someone else find their way out. You can't earn love that was never freely given. I understood that now. The silence from my parents wasn't loss. It was peace. Walking away wasn't giving up. It was growing up. Some families are born. Others are built. And the ones you build, the ones that choose you back, those are the ones that matter. I turned from the window and caught my reflection in the glass. I looked different than I had 4 months ago. Not harder, but clearer. Not bitter, just free. I wasn't the son they'd wanted. But I was exactly who I needed to be. And that was enough. Have you ever realized that the people who gave you life never actually wanted you to live? Maybe that's not the tragedy. Maybe the tragedy is staying, waiting, hoping they'll change their minds. The gift is leaving. The gift is living anyway. The gift is discovering that life without their love is still life. And sometimes